striking cover. And in the upper right-hand corner, there are two words that say "Look Inside." If you click on those two words, the book will electronically open, and you can read Carl's work. You can read some of it right there. There's a really nice excerpt there on Amazon. Now, Carl, it's available, I think, a couple of other places. Is that right?
Yes, at Ex Libra, the publisher.
Okay, just go to their webpage?
Yeah, you can buy it there also.
Now, you've got another new project I know that you're excited about and that you're working on that is sort of a spin-off or maybe a further researched project that goes with this book. Tell me about your new project.
It's actually a recreation or re-editing of the first book, but it varies in size, and it's a better book than the first one because in the title of it also is "What is your perspective of truth?" Let me repeat it again. What is your perspective of the truth? What it goes into, it has additional chapters, which is dealing with money and also some other things that the U.S. government is not going to like. And it also goes into what we call planets, which we've been taught by teachers, scientists, and so on, that planet exists and that the sun is 93 million miles away from Earth, which, according to the Bible, that destroys the Genesis portion of the Bible, which man wants you to take. Man doesn't not basically the generality of man is not to believe that there is a living God. So because man say that the sun is 93 million miles away from Earth, and that the moon is 250,000 miles away from Earth. But if you read Genesis, the sun and the moon are in the expanse of the heaven, and the expanse is the arch of the sky. And that leads to a whole discussion of a whole lot of other things, which, because of the construct of the way the world is, they won't believe it because they've been this information has been put out there for over since the 1500s, which is 600 years ago or more. No, a little less than 600 years. So, and it's been put in books, and in my book, I stated that you don't want liars to publish information because it misleads your concept, the way of thinking. But liars have already published information which has been accepted as true. It's kind of like in both books, I compare this world system as the Matrix. What do you mean by that? Okay, let me put it like this. Matrix is one of my favorite films. And the main character is Neo. And in one thing, we see that Neo is a coder. And since he's a coder, the system has actually gave him the identity as coder. But in another part of the scene, Neil actually is in a pod. He never uses eyes. He never uses legs. He never uses taste buds. He never uses hearing. He's in a pod. They locate him and disconnect from the system. In other words, he was just like a battery operating, giving the system energy. But the system had identified him as a coder, and so in his thinking, he thinks he's a coder, but in actuality, he's not a coder. He's just a battery, giving the system energy. And so this world system, as we see it today, there's a concept in our being that we think who we think that we are. Same as the Matrix. And when they dropped him from the system, he found out that he wasn't a coder. He had never used his eyes. He never used his legs. And they had to put acupuncture on his so that now he sees the world as it is.
So you've also got a cover design for your new book. You're the one that did the cover. Tell me about that new cover. Okay,
the cover is basically it's the continent that we call Africa, and the reason I came with that cover Africa because man named it Africa, but God in Genesis 2:8 called it Genesis. He called it not Genesis, but he called it the land of Eden. That's Genesis 2:8. And so there's a misconception of our thought process that man called it Africa, but God called it the land of Eden. And you even see that I think on PBS, some of the stories, they said the land of Eden. So it's not, according to man, it's called Africa, but God called it Eden, land of Eden. So, and also on that cover, you find the word Genesis. The G is backwards because our thinking has been turned around to accept what man say is true, but it actually is not true. We've been misled to think a certain way. And so we have to, in actuality, decide what is actually true for ourselves. That's why the title is, what is your perspective of the truth? Because someone's telling the truth and someone's not. In other words, somebody's lying to us, trying to deceive us that there is no God, but there is a living and true God. And many don't believe there is a God. And I have no problem with you don't believe there's a God. But then there's consequences for that unbelief. And you or the person who don't believe will pay for their consequences, whether they believe it or not. I have no problem with you if you don't believe there's a God. But I know there is a living God.
You have certainly given our listeners a lot to think about today, Carl. Is there any final thoughts that you would like to leave the listeners with?
Yeah, just study any information that someone gives to you. Don't accept it on first hand because they could be speaking a lie. You don't know, but study what anybody say to you. So let me get back with you. Let me look it up. let me study and see if the information you're giving me is correct. Because if it's not giving you correct, you're going down the wrong road. So, and this falls for anybody, pastor, teacher, scientist, because there are a lot of lies out there, and we just go, okay, but don't accept what a person says as true, because they come out of their mouth, because they could be lying to you. So anything that anybody say to you, study it first. Read up on it. Don't take it as true.
Now, you've got a website that's not quite available yet. It's under construction. When will your new website be up, do you think?
It'll be up next month.
Can you give our listeners an address?
Not as yet, but it'll be up next month.
But if they look for Carl L. Jones, they could probably find that website, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
Well, Carl, I want to thank you so much for being my guest on the Books on Air podcast. You've given our listeners so much to think about. It's just been such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much.
All right, Suzanne. It was nice to talk to you also.
Now, remember, you can find Carl's book, We Are the My People in the Bible, and you can also find What is Your Perspective of the Truth on Amazon by Carl, C-A-R-L, the letter L period, Jones, Carl L. Jones.
The second book is actually on Barnes & Noble.
Oh, good. Thank you for saying that. Is it somewhere else, too?
Not as yet.
Okay, but they could find it on Barnes & Noble?
Barnes & Noble website. Mm-hmm.
Good. Thank you, Carl.
You're welcome.
You've been listening to the Books on Air podcast, brought to you on webtalkradio.net. You can also hear this podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and Apple Podcasts. I'm Suzanne Harris, and I really hope that you'll join me for the next Books on Air podcast, because remember, you never know who we're going to talk to, and you never know what we're going to talk about. Thank you so very much for listening.